This is Atco. I've put out a few videos out on talking about the history of recording media, and we've talked about the Edison, from the Edison cylinders up in around 1900 up until more current today. Come on, little girl. Come on, little girl. About the tapes of 8-tracks and cassettes. What I wanted to do in this one was I want to talk a little bit about quadraphonic. Now, quadraphonic sound was introduced in 1969, and what quadraphonic was is that with regular stereo that we've had in the past, was that you would listen to your music, and if you had a good system, the idea was that you could have it sound as good as a concert, where in the front you would have the band, and the closest you get to it, the better you would hear the instruments, and it's what we've always got used to. With stereo, of course, it would have some separation, but the idea was to make you feel like you're at a concert. What they did with quad, instead of watching a concert from the front, the idea was to not make you have them watching them from the front, but to be in the middle of the band. And in order to do this, they would take the source or microphones from the bands, and they would record different focuses from the different instruments of the band, and each one would focus upon towards each of the channels. What I mean by that would be if you were going to play back a quad system and they had produced this as quad, this would give you 4 different speakers in your listening space, and they'd put like if you're in a room, you would put a speaker in the 4 corners of your room and sit in the middle of that, and then you would start hearing the sound coming out of the band from the 4 different separate speakers. And I'll tell you what, they've got some really good surround sound systems today, and you can have 4 speakers or more. But quad, the separation that you would get from the speakers from the different instruments and the different musicians, it's so sharp, and you could be sitting there and all of a sudden you get one instrument coming out of the back left of where you're listening, and then you'll be hearing the band playing in the front there, and all of a sudden there's another speaker with another instrument here and here and here, and it gives you that feeling that you're in the middle of it. You're not watching it from the front, you're from the middle of it. So that was the idea of getting it, and in order to do this, they used had to have 4 channels to record. So the best place they did it at the beginning was reel-to-reel tapes, and a player that would use 4 channels of the tape. Now, I was in the Air Force in the 1970s, and I went in. I was in the Philippines and Thailand for about a year and a half, and quad was coming up real quick. So I thought, and probably everybody thought, that this could replace stereo, or at least for the high-end equipment. So, when I was in service, the Air Force took care of just about anything I needed. So I spent most of my money on my equipment, and I bought the best reel-to-reel, the players, the receiver, the best speakers I could buy, as did many of the guys that I was there. And I bought that equipment, and I picked up about maybe a a dozen quad reel-to-reel tapes, and I thought, man, I really had something here. So when my time it came out of staying in Asia, and I wanted to get back to the U.S., I thought I'm really ready to roll with this great equipment. Well, I got back in the U.S. in 1974, and to my surprise, quad was dying very quick by the time I was there. And I couldn't believe it, because it's great, but the cost was just too expensive for most people. So what the manufacturers thought they could do to try to bring the sales back, they started making different types of quad, but using vinyl with different formats. And none of them were anywhere close to what you get by discrete reel-to-reel tape. But to try to get the sales up, they were coming up with this. The bad side is that there was 3 different formats that had come out. None of them are compatible with quad, at least. So you had to have a receiver and an amplifier that could make the quad out of those particular formats. A couple of them really didn't do very well at all. One did pretty good, but it needed a little more equipment in order to play it. It had to have its own turntable as well, and again, costs got high. So it came out that people thought, well, what do I get out of all this? You know, put a lot more equipment, maybe it sounds a little bit better, but I could just as well get stereo and not worry about something obsoleting with these different formats. So what did we get out of that? We landed up that quad turned out to be a consumer failure, a commercial failure. It just, the technology was great, but when you can't get it right, that it sounds the best, and bring it at a price that people can pay, yeah, it turns out to be a failure. But I had my equipment for years, and I only had about a dozen of real good quad discrete reel-to-reel tapes. But I'd bring in people one time, and I'd take, you know, even my system playing with stereo sounded great because I had good Bose speakers, and so I'd say, hey, come in here and listen to one of these. And I'd take a vinyl record, regular stereo record on there, and we'd play it, and it sounded good in my system. I said, now I'm going to play the same album off of a discrete reel-to-reel quad and play it again, and people would just be amazed. The sound was great. You'd hear sounds that you didn't hear even off the vinyl, because it could focus onto particular speakers, and all of a sudden that sound would be sharp, and you'd hear things from the side, the left, the front, the back, the left and right. I mean, it was great. And if you never had a chance to hear quad, yeah, it's too bad, because you really missed something. So the best was really the reel-to-reel. The vinyl came out, but it was tried a way to get the price down, didn't work out. There was an 8-track quad that came out, but unfortunately the equipment was cheaper as well, and it still could not reproduce of what the reel-to-reel did. So eventually, by 1975, there wasn't any more new equipment being made. Most companies were starting to stop producing, and by the end of the 70s, there was just a few. You could still get quad, and even that was becoming to be more classical than anything. So, but you know, it's too bad, because we could do quad today using it digitally and give that same sound that we used to have and do it a lot cheaper using digital equipment, and possibly someday we might get that back. We'll see. But I want to give a little bit of view of what quad was, and it was really a exciting time for me with music, and we'll see if it comes back. So that's all I have about quad, and I want to have another video very shortly to talk a little bit more about the current history of the CDs and the MP3 players. So for now, this is me and the little girl, and watch any of my other videos if you will. I would be happy if you would listen to my other videos as well. My channel is Atco's 21117, or just source on YouTube and just do Atco's Collections. So for now, this is Atco and little girl signing off.